Get ready to create dreams for your customers. This is our review of Neodreams.
Neodreams is a worker placement tableau builder about playing dream cards, and what really drew me in was the futuristic, whimsical, fantasy artwork.
I stumbled across this game browsing the BGG Gen Con games list, and I'm glad I did because I really enjoyed it. We'll tell you why after this quick how to play. Neodreams is played over a variable number of turns with players either placing workers or taking the cycle sleep action.
Players may place one of their 3 workers, or Onironauts, onto locations and gain resources or perform actions.
Some of the possible actions are drawing cards, playing cards, linking clients, or broadcasting Neodreams.
A player may also choose to cycle sleep, which moves the cycle marker and returns the Onironauts under the marker to their players.
Returned Onironauts will also allow players to perform a returnal action, drawing a card or playing a card.
If a player doesn't have any workers, they must perform the cycle sleep action.
There are 3 types of dream cards, and each has a different ability that can be used during the game.
When any player has placed 12 dream cards in their dreamscape, the endgame is triggered.
When the player with the last player token finishes their turn, the game ends.
Players add up their scores from dream cards, placed objects, and leftover resources. The player with the most points wins.
Before you head off to Dreamland, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button.
All your likes and subscribes really help our channel grow, so thank you.
Like I said at the top, I stumbled across this browsing through the BGG Gen Con game list. We were trying to put together our list of most anticipated games that were going to be at Gen Con in 2024. And then I saw that it was the same designer as another game that we love, Furnace. I was like, oh, this really looks interesting. It's kind of a tableau builder. You get abilities as you play your cards, and then as you build more of your cards out, your abilities will compound. In some turns, you may only have one action, but other turns, you may be able to chain some things. So it really looked exciting. But when we got home and started playing, not only were the mechanics a lot of fun, but it's also a really beautiful game too, because all the cards have different artwork, and it really does make you feel like you are in this dreamscape world.
You know, when this game hit your list for the what games that we anticipate or excited for Gen Con, I was surprised because it was like a needle in the haystack that you found, because that list can be extensive or even just other lists too. So for this to jump on there and you were telling me a little bit about it, you were like, oh, Furnace and etc. I'm like, okay. I missed it, but I'm intrigued now. You have my attention. The artwork, I mean, I think that's what really draws me to it. It's like kind of a darkish theme, but futuristic, but still like fantasy. I mean, you got like technology or UFOs, but then you got castles. I just really liked admiring the artwork, and there isn't too much words or reading that you have to do on these cards. So that's another thing I really appreciated. You can really just soak in the artwork.
The main mechanic of the game is a worker placement. You're going to start the game with 3 workers, and you're going to place your workers on the Onirosphere, which is basically the board that's in the center that has all the action placements locations on them. And there are 4 columns with 3 rows, so there's 12 basic actions that you can place your workers. And as you place your worker, you can then either gain resources, which you keep track of on your board by moving these up and down, or some of them will give you actions that you can perform. Like you can link a client, you can broadcast your Neodreams, things like that. But that's not the main goal of the game. The main goal of the game is to be placing the dreams and filling up your dreamscape. However, it's easy to learn how to play because most of the time you're going to be playing your worker on the Onirosphere. It's when you cycle and you return your workers, that's when most of the time you're going to be able to be playing cards. There is one spot on the Onirosphere where you can play a card, but for the most part, it's when you retrieve your workers that you want to have that timing set out so that you're going to be able to play cards. So I like the way that those mechanics work together.
With these types of games, what I always really like to do is like, is there a perfect engine that I can get started at the very beginning that really helps me? So are there discounts? Are there certain cards that just seem more powerful? I like looking at what's available and saying like, okay, like I can do that, I can chain that. And, you know, just kind of putting it all together. So at the very end, you just have this awesome engine that just chains and does a lot of things.
And I do think that you can do that with this game, but there are so many cards and they're all different with their different abilities. Some of them are same but different abilities, like, oh, gain this many or gain this many of this type of resource. You can know ahead of time, yeah, if I can get these cards, that'll be a great chain. But it's not always possible to achieve those because you're only going to have 2 of each type of card in the drafting pool, and other players may get it, or you may not have the right resources to be able to play it at the right time. So yes, there are probably perfect chains in there. It's just not as easy as you would think to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you know, with the draft pool, I remember many times where I'm just sitting there, I'm like, ooh, that would be nice. That will really help me out. But player's turn, someone takes it, my turn, I'm like, Okay, well that changes things now, much like how a dream might change.
And then you got to work out, okay, well, now this is what's available. Now, how do I get that chain and how do I put it together?
You know, with more players that we had, I always felt like, oh, okay, I know now. And then someone takes their turn, and I'm like, okay, I don't know anymore. And then, and then finally when it got back to me, I'm like, all right, I guess I'll do this. I found myself having way more of just one resource and just very poor in all the other resources. And I'm like, well, that didn't work out how I planned it.
Aside from placing your worker, the other option that you'll be able to do is to cycle sleep. And you can either do that whenever you feel like doing it, or you have to do it once you've placed all 3 of your Oniro knots. And the way that the cycle sleep works is you move the cycle sleep marker to the next section, which is going to be above one of the columns of workers. You will be able to perform an action while doing that as well as a bonus, but then you're also going to return all the Oniro knots that are in that column. If yours isn't there, then you won't be able to do a returnal action as well. But if yours is in that column, you'll also be able to do that returnal action. And those returnal actions are you're returning your workers, and then you can either draw a card, depending on the row will be the type of card that you can draw from, or you could play a card of any one of the 3 types. So there can be some cycle sleep actions. If all 3 of your workers are there and it gets moved over, you can play 3 cards. Or if you have 2 there, you can play 2. The other thing that I really like about it is you can go the whole game without performing the cycle sleep action, because if you play your workers and then another player has to cycle and you get your workers back, then you can keep playing your workers. So if you get that timing and that synergy working really well, that's when it really does feel like this game has a lot of interesting ideas going on.
I'm going to go back to the artwork. Just looking at this, it really drew me in, and much like Dreams, you can take any one of these and kind of stare at it for a little bit and just kind of find some inspiration, or, like, oh, I like this, like here's a castle, but then there's a robot right there, or, oh, here's a robot, but they're, I don't know, like underwater or something, or there's a mermaid. Not that that's exactly in here, but I like how you can just take a look at these and just kind of really just take it in and, maybe just find some creativity or get the creative juices flowing just by looking at it.
I really enjoyed how balanced the game feels, because as you're playing the game ends when one player gets to 12 cards, and then everyone finishes their turn until it gets back to the last player marker, which signifies who the last player was, so that you know that everyone's taking the same amount of turns. But it feels really balanced, because by the end of the game, most players will have 10, 11, 12 cards. No one's going to be there with only 2 cards unless you really are bad at playing. Plus, as you're going, you also have all these objects that you can place on cards too. So if you don't have abilities that are, or you're not taking the actions that are letting you place all these objects, you may score a lot of points on your cards, but you may not have a lot of objects, whereas someone else may not score a lot of points, but they filled up all their cards with objects. So you can look around the board and it can feel like, okay, well, he's got a lot of stuff there, he's got a lot of stuff. It'll be interesting to see what the final score is. So it always felt like, okay, the dreams are over, let's calculate the scores, and you won by 1 point. So I like how evenly it feels while playing. What did you not like about this game?
It's not a big dislike, but the theming and the mechanics, I feel they don't mesh, like they're not very tight. There's like a loose connection. Like, yes, okay, you're getting dreams and then like it chains, but maybe one can make the argument that like, well, that's your dream sometimes. Sometimes you go from under the sea to like in space. And so they don't need to connect. You don't need to have a row as you're building your tableau to like have a theming of a dream.
The main issue I have with this game, it's a similar issue that I have with a lot of games that have lots of cards and all the cards are same but different, or different completely type of a thing. With this game, the first time you play it, you don't really know what's in the deck, and you have 3 different types of cards. You have cards that are activated when you play the client on it. You have cards that are activated when you broadcast or you choose a certain action. And you have cards that are activated when something happens and you trigger that card. And you don't really know how they all go together that first time you're playing. You don't really know what possible actions are in there. It's like, oh, if I do this, I'll never be able to do it again. But you don't know that there's a card in there that lets you remove that client and you can then take that action again. You just got to know how to work it out right. So the first time you play it, you might just be a little bit like, so much is going on and I don't really know. And I didn't really feel the synergy that you keep saying about this game. I didn't really feel it. But the more you play it, the more you know the cards. If you look at all the cards, you've played it enough that you know what to kind of go after and kind of what to reach for, then it really does start to feel like, oh yeah, this is a really fun game. But it has that problem of that first game, that second game. You got to get over that hump of, I didn't know what I was doing. It's like, well, hopefully you enjoyed it and you want to figure out what you were doing and then keep playing.
Yeah, it's like that riddle that you're this close to getting, and you're like, okay, now we gotta do it again. I know I'm this close. Like, I love that feeling in games when like you play it, whether it was an hour or it was 30 minutes. You're like, nope, run it back. Like I'm this close. Overall, I'd buy this game. I like how it has the Furnace-esque, which is a game I really love, but then now there's worker placement in here. So you have actions, you gain resources, but then going back, I know I keep harping on it, but just the artwork, I like staring at the cards and like, oh, that looks pretty cool how that city is. Oh, look, here's another city. So I really just like, as we're playing, and you don't have to read too much, they go, and then you can just kind of appreciate all of the different dreamscapes, or everyone's dreamscape that they're playing.
Overall, I would recommend this game. I had a lot of fun with it. I'm glad that we just stumbled upon it on the BGG list before we went to Gen Con. Every time we play it, I enjoy it more because you really do learn those synergistic qualities of the cards. And I feel like it's a game that gets better. It's like a fine wine. It gets better every time. It gets better with age, kind of a thing. If I was scoring this game on BGG, I'd give it an 8 overall, and I really recommend this game. That was our review of Neodreams.
What'd you think? Are you going to be dreaming about this game for your next game night? Let us know in the comments below.
And as always, if you're enjoying our content, please like this video, subscribe to our channel.
Until next time, I'm Lee.
And I'm Kenny, and go party like a board gamer.